Into this month's Shutter Magazine article. I'm Dustin Lucas, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the new masking tool. So I'm going to give you 3 tips on how to use this tool, and I gotta say, it is a huge overhaul for Lightroom Classic users. It's busy season, and just like Adobe to drop a new release, a new version of Lightroom Classic, as we're all crazy busy. Apple dropped a new operating system. I'm using a new M1 MacBook Pro, so why not? Just kind of testing the waters with everything when we don't have the time to, right? So, kind of jumping into this new masking tool. It is a game changer, and I don't use that term lightly. They brought in AI and paired that with the masking tool. So we'll get into that a little bit deeper on where's this new tool, how do I use it. I'll walk you through those steps. So tip number 1 is going to be the AI-based select subject or select sky. And what's awesome about this tool is that you have the ability to now select based on a subject or a sky, just like you do in Photoshop. They've had subject select for a while. It's always kind of been, for lack of better words, dog shit. But for Lightroom and for any of us users that like using Lightroom for 99% of what we do, we now have the ability to do that. So that tool is going to allow us a lot more flexibility, and it keeps us out of Photoshop, right? As Lightroom users, that's really kind of our goal. So tip number 2 is going to be refining the mask. So, there's ways to add and subtract masks, from masking, which is nothing new. But there's this new tool you can use called Intersect. And what it does is it allows you to make a selection or a mask, and then you can intersect that mask with another layer, either using like color range or the brush tool or subject select again. I mean, you have these, you can layer these different masking tools and you can invert them to start to do like some dodging and burning, right? We want to dodge the client and burn down the background. So we'll get to that a little bit further for tip number 2. Tip number 3, syncing masks. Now, you might be thinking, hey, Dust, there's no way I'm going to sync local adjustments. It's just not, doesn't work. Masks aren't one size fits all. Well, I will tell you, you can sync AI masks, and then all you have to do is update the mask regions when you're done. And I'll show you that. So that's like, I feel like the biggest overhaul that they did is you can actually sync masks and then you just update them with the click of a mouse. So we'll get into that in a little bit, but let's jump into tip number 1 and look at this new interface. Jumping in, tip number 1 is going to be using the subject select tool to do a dodge and burn layer. So we want to do dodge our client and burn down the background. So you see here on the left, I have my before image shot out of camera. Lighting's pretty good. Everything's overall balanced correctly, and then I have my final edit here on the right. So you'll notice at the very top of the develop panel, your tools are kind of hidden, they're gone, right? You still have cropping, you still have the healing and clone brush, you have the red eye reduction here, and the masking tool is just this big little circle here, right? Big little. But you click on that circle there and you can see my masks already pop up here, right? I've already created those pretty quickly. So what I want to do is I want to reset this image and show you from scratch how quickly we can create a dodge and burn layers. So you'll also notice that the masking layers or the masking panel that pops up here, you can drag it over here and bring it in line with your other tools as well. So let's go ahead and delete all of our masks and start from scratch. So most importantly, what you want to do is you want to make sure the exposure is balanced for the ambient light. So we want the background to be darker and kind of in the exposure we want it to be, so that way we have to do less work overall. So we could just really dodge our clients here. So if I wanted to darken that down a little bit more, warm things up, I could. Now skin tone's getting a bit too warm, so we'll cover that in just a bit. So now that we're ready to do a mask, what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose subject select. So it's going to quickly detect the subject, and you can see it does a pretty good job right out the gate. It grabs the edges pretty good, but it's going to struggle. It's literally going to struggle with these acute angles. Now this isn't a big deal in the moment, but you might be thinking, well, if I want to quickly remove that, how do I do it? Well, for mask 1, which I'm going to name this subject, we can start to refine this, right? So if I want to, just like before with any masking, you can add and subtract, but now you can do add and subtract with different masking tools. So in this case, if I wanted to subtract with the brush, because I want to do it by hand, probably be your best option here. I also have auto mask turned on. You see I have the minus symbol in the middle of my brush, so I can go in here and just kind of quickly go up against the face, and it should do a pretty good job of not including the face in that selection. It's not doing the best job, of course, but if we're just quickly going in here and removing some of that, that's fine. Now we can do the add, make sure that the face is added back in, make sure that we're not balancing out the nose too much. Oh, add brush, sorry. We want to add, make sure we're actually selected on add here, and we'll bring back in for the face. So we could do a quick refinement there. Same would be for, I mean, that's a pretty, it's an acute angle there. It's kind of missing. Same for there. So if we want to do subtract brush, right, we can go in here and it's going to grab auto mask and kind of just, tamper with that. So again, not perfect, but you can see it just does a quick mask of the subjects, right? Acute angles, like I said, is where it's going to struggle. Now what we can do is we can go in our effects and we can start to apply effects to this specifically that we want to kind of enhance our subject here. So if we want them to pop a little bit more, we can kind of do that and kind of do a little bit of a toning effect and kind of show before and after, right? Have them pop a little bit more, bring some more exposure, select on the subject layer and make sure that we are increasing exposure, okay? So now if we want to do a background change, like we want to add some warmth to the background, we want to tone it down even more, we want to bring some highlights up but not affect our subject, all we have to do is hit plus, subject select, and we can actually invert the mask. So what's crazy about that is you can take that mask, invert it, and now it's going to only affect the background. Now, part of the problem with that is that here, right, it grabs some of her, right? So we'd still have to do a little bit of a, we'd have to do some refinements here. So this is where we'd come in and we would use the brush to subtract the dress and any other areas that it grabbed that it shouldn't have. Like I said, it's not perfect, but it does a pretty good job for a quick automated AI-based masking. It's not too bad at all. So I'm gonna make sure that that's kind of done, and now our hair's kind of coming in. It's getting a little wonky there. So we will make sure to do the subtract. Make sure the hair is, that area will be just fine. So bringing that in. So now as we zoom out, we can start to tone that background down, right? So as soon as we start adjusting that, it will remove our mask overlay. We can bring the saturation down. We can leave clarity kind of where it's at. What I typically do, we could do some raising of the blacks, dehaze, and I really want to add some warmth back there to kind of have this image pop just a little bit more. So making sure, of course, I'm on my subject layer here versus the mask. Now we can rename this one background. That'll kind of help identify that later, so we know which one, right, is the background. Add some more warmth, and now we kind of have our before and after, right? Pretty quick, automated AI. So that's what I like to use for dodging and burning and toning. But I mean, there's a lot there to unpack, of course, in that first tip. So let's jump into tip number 2, which is going to be using that Intersect tool even further. 2 is going to be using the Intersect feature to refine our mask. So what I've done here is I've used the Intersect feature for masking specifically to do a skin retouch. So for skin smoothing, I want to just affect the skin tones, right? So to quickly do that, you might be thinking, well, why not just use the color range, right? Pick her skin. Problem with the color range is it's going to sample the entire image, right? So if there's other areas of the image that have these kind of peachy skin tones, those are going to be selected as part of our mask as well. So what I like to do is a two-step technique. First, I'll do a subject select, so it's only going to choose our subject. Then I would intersect that with the color range, right? So it's only going to look for those tones within the subject selection. Limitation is, well, if their clothing or their hair is very close to that same color, right, we can refine the color range tool to get a little bit closer, but you might have some overlap to where then you'd still have to kind of subtract some of that mask, right? A lot to unpack. Let me show you what I mean. So before and after here, let's zoom in, and you can kind of see before and after here. Left's before, right's after. So I'm going to go ahead and narrow this down to one image, and I am going to delete all masks so you can kind of see this image from where it's at. So first thing I'd want to do is do a select subject. All right, so then in my select subject, right, and true to form, we're just going to call this skin. So we're then going to choose the intersect mask width. So this tool is going to intersect the current mask that we have, which is the select subject, with another selection. So I want to choose the color range tool to then sample her cheek. It immediately just chooses their skin tones, right? So we can see where it goes from here to there instantly. Now the lips, right? You're going to see the lips kind of involved, all that kind of stuff. So if you want to click on the color range, kind of, sub layer here, whatever you want to call this, almost like a clipping mask, kind of how this is set up in layers, the appearance of layers like in Photoshop. But what we can do is we can start to lower that, and it'll reduce the amount of overlap between other areas. You see how it's in her hair. It's really showing up on his face. So we just want to be kind of careful where that's going. So at a certain level, we're going to have to just subtract from hair and just kind of refine that there. It is what it is. It's not a perfect tool, but in kind of seeing that, you want to make sure we reduce those areas that are unnecessary. So as we kind of toggle this on and off, we can see what areas are being affected. Some of the areas on his shirt, of course, are getting that effect as well. We'll just remove those quite quickly, and like to toggle with the O key to kind of see what's being affected, what's working, what's not, right? So that does a pretty good job overall. So let's get some of that out of her hair as well. So, right, you can get super detailed with this, but I think for this purpose, we have it good enough. So I'm also going to go in and I'm going to just get rid of it on the lips here as well. No reason to soften the lips. Let's keep that intact. So now that we have this taken care of, we can apply our skin softening. So I like to do negative texture. I'm not a huge fan of going heavy on negative clarity. It's not really my thing. But what I want to do is I want to kind of adjust for her skin tones, and then I would do his later, right? He needs some dodging and burning on the face a little bit, maybe some red reduction, which is fine. But what I want to do is kind of get her skin perfected here. So dropping the exposure, dropping the highlights, even dropping the white point. Not too much, right? We don't want her skin looking gray, but we just want to reduce some of that luminance because, right, when you close your eyes and look at the image, you go to the brightest spot. Nobody wants to see bright spots on your subject's forehead, so we want to make sure that we're toning that down just right, but we're not making them look either not like themselves or making them look worse. So we can kind of toggle this on and off to kind of get the image where we want it, right? Kind of some harsh light. Now we're softening that up. It starts to look really nice. So with that said, you have to keep in mind with the clothing limitations of that. Now we can come in here and reduce some of the reds. We can even bring the saturation down just a little bit. And we can really take this image, just skin smoothing, right? Really kind of clean that up. Now, there's some other areas that we'd want to come into, right? If we want to do another mask and we want to, with a brush, and we would want to kind of, if we want to soften this here, you can brighten that up a little on exposure and soften it even more. That kind of helps with the lines on the neck. I think it goes a long way, right? Between that harsh shadow there and just kind of working with the neck. Looks nice. And of course we come in here with the brush and we could come in and brighten this eye up here. You know, if we really wanted to start messing with some beauty retouching. Not too much. We can just bring that up just enough to where the lighting's right. Iris enhance, things like that. Also, you know, we'd want to do some dodging on his skin here as well, right? So be something just to kind of help in with that. And reduce those reds. Drop some saturation down. Probably not go so heavy on the exposure, but little things, right? Little things go a long way. So I think it might be a little heavy on the skin. Don't judge me there, but you get the idea of what we're going for here. So what we can do now is we can look at the Intersect tool, and what I like to use is gradient tool sometimes when I want to enhance, say, the bottom of an image. So more specifically, right, if I wanted to enhance these kind of leaves and the dead grass here, but I want to, you know, have that refined to where they're removed from the mask, it's pretty simple to do, right? So I'm going to come in here and show you kind of a technique that I used with the gradient tool and intersecting it with subject select. And then you have to invert that subject select, right? So there's a lot of layering and multi-masking tools to get your mask quickly and automated. So you have to be kind of creative, no pun intended, with this process. So I'm going to remove all the masks. I'm going to hit the M key. I'm going to jump into the gradient. I'm going to hold shift so it levels that out, right? All the little tips and hot keys and things like that are super helpful for efficiency in Lightroom, as we all know. Now, of course, they're selected, right? So with my mask, I can go to intersect with subject select. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to take that gradient mask that we made and it's going to apply it to a subject select. Well, that's not what we want. That's why we have the ability to, right, turn off the invert. So then we can go in here and it's removing them and it's only going to affect the ground. Now, of course, it missed between his legs. So this is where we need to add into our mask, and we're going to use the brush with auto mask turned on, and we're going to be pretty loose with how that's going to select. Maybe that's a little bit too much. Let's make our brush a little bit smaller, and also probably should refine our feathering. That would probably help. We'll just come in here. Yep, a little bit better. And then we can do, I think that's fine. Now we want to do subtract. Same way for the boots, right? Because the boots need to come out. So we don't want to, I'm trying to affect those. So make sure that that looks good. Get it off the pants. Pretty quick refinement, right? So as I zoom out, right, we immediately have what we need. So now I can start to bring up the exposure. I can add some warmth into that because that's kind of what I wanted to do. If I think it's too sharp, right, I can drop the texture, or I can go negative into, you know, you can blur it out. I mean, it look kind of funny if you make it too blurry, right? In the plane of focus that they're in, this grass is supposed to be sharp. Like, you know, be smart about the, you know, creative blurring. It's kind of silly, but you can tone that back a little bit. There's nothing wrong with that. And then you can lift the blacks, lift the dehaze, kind of a technique I like to use for toning there a little bit. And you can lift shadows, do kind of whatever you want. Kill those highlights down so they're not too bright. But you kind of get the idea of where we would take this, right? Those little things, and it's only affecting where their feet are. Same way we go up here at the top, right? So if we want to use the M key, we'll drag down for our gradient to be up there. This is the quickest way to kind of get building in the background. Go in here, intersect with subject select, and we need to uncheck the invert, and we're done. Now that that's ready to go, if you want to brighten that background up, if you want to warm it up, whatever you want to do. Maybe fix this upper left corner, that would be with the brush, but we can do all of that. Maybe you want to take clarity up on it, kind of make it a little more gritty. Completely up to you, right? But you have the ability to do that all independently with these masks, right? So pretty cool. So tip number 2, the Intersect tool, I feel like is probably my second favorite part of the masking change, because you can intersect or overlay different masking tools. So let's get to tip number 3, which is what Lightroom is good for: sync settings and working efficiently. It's going to be a sync settings technique that I use with the new masking tool. So while you're already probably thinking, can I sync AI-based masks? Because before, you could sync local adjustments or masking tools, but you'd have to move the pins around, right? That's the case, right, with masking. It's just how it works. With the AI feature, you can sync multiple images and then update each one of those masking layers if you were using the AI software. So if you're using the AI-based subject select and you want to sync that to multiple images to have, say, a mask applied like it is here, we can very quickly do that to apply this look to all these other images rather quickly. I'll show you how to do it. So in the develop module or grid mode, doesn't matter, Shift Command S to sync, and we are going to sync, right? These need to be computed on a target on the target photo, right? So what does that mean? I'll show you in just a second. So you see my background and subject layers are automatically selected. Now when we go to each image, I want to stay in the masking tool. So I'm going to select the background on the first image, hold Command and go right arrow so I can stay in the masking tool. If I don't do that, right, it's going to bounce around. So now that I'm in, right, I can't advance the images, right? I'm hitting the right arrow, it's not doing anything. So you have to hold Command and hit the right arrow to advance. A little trick. So select it on the background layer, right? I hit update, and now it's immediately going to apply that there. Same way with the subject. And all I have to do is do that per image. Update, wait, right? Background, update, and do the same thing. It's literally all we have to do. And it'll immediately apply our settings that we applied, because that's the biggest part of this, like the effect settings. I'm not going to create a preset for a specific image that I was editing. I'm going to have adjustments that are going to be image specific. So I just want those to be applied to multiple images in that sequence at that time. And this lets me do that quite quickly. So as you can just see, I immediately have my mask applied to all those images. I mean, that's insane. And probably my favorite part of this tool. I can sync the AI-based masks, but all I have to do is reconfigure my subject select. So that's, again, I feel like the game-changing part to this entire tool. It's not a perfect tool, and I think we're only scratching the surface of what the masking, this new masking interface is going to offer. But this is huge for 6 images, custom masked, done. So I can show this for my IPS. It's ready to go. Those are the results, and I think they speak for themselves. So this new masking tool, I think we're just scratching the surface. I know I said that before on what this tool can offer. And, you know, no matter what kind of hardware you have, no matter what machine. I mean, I was working on my wife's computer, which is a MacBook Pro with like 8 gigs of RAM. It's like 6 years old. The interface is pretty quick even on her machine. I mean, it's not like something where you're having to wait forever for it to calculate. I mean, it's quick. So it's definitely going to help to have smart previews, you know, working as fast as you can. Is obviously the goal of Lightroom. But Lightroom version 11, I think version 11.01 is out now. It already has a patch update for some bugs, right? All the bugs with the new software. So keep in mind, right? Limitations of the software, updating when you're super busy. You might want to wait for off season for this, but from a masking tool technique, and if you have control over your systems, you know how to update, you know how to downgrade, upgrade, all that kind of stuff if you need to. I highly recommend this update. It's a huge one. The October release of the version 11 Lightroom Classic. It's just a game changer. I mean, from AI based masking, again, scratching the surface on the new tool, the Intersect feature to where I could do a subject selection and then I can select on the skin afterwards with color range. I mean, that's huge. Using the gradient tool and then intersecting that with the subject select, like I love that. It just allows so much flexibility and really just accuracy. Is probably the best word to describe this tool. It's a very accurate tool. With anything AI based, it's going to get smarter. It's going to get better. So keep in mind for future updates. I'm excited. So that's all I have for you guys this month. Tune in next month as I'll have probably some more features on if there are any more releases or just new techniques and tips for this tool.